Hello everybody, and welcome to the final class, Class 10 of Premiere 202, Premiere Pro for the Filmmaker. In this class, we are going to take a break from the Model BTS edit because we wrapped that up last week with the final export. And we're going to talk a little bit about some cool things with red workflow, stabilization, and time remapping. And to use a demo for this, we're going to talk a little about some RC helicopter footage that we shot with SnapRoll Media. I just want to show you quick this first demo video of behind the scenes of SnapRoll in action so you can kind of have an idea of what they do with the Red Epic on their RC helicopters. And there's a lot of strengths and limitations to using a system like this, and I'll show you how to fix any issues that we might come across with, using helicopter footage or any kind of footage on dolly tracks or moving footage, even some of the time-lapse motion control work that I do, I'll use Warp Stabilizer for, and it's an amazing tool. So check it out. So this right here was a shoot that we did with Taylor Swift on a big tour that me and John did with our production company. And we brought SnapRoll Media on, and it was the first time working with them, and they are a great crew. But there's, the cool thing about RC helicopters in general is they add a lot of production value to your shoot, but the technology is still growing, developing. So as an editor, you might be handed some of this type of footage and need to know how to work around it or how to make it the best looking as you possibly can. This was in the stadium that we were flying around, and then there I am right there. And that's our director, Christian Lamb. And those are the guys from SnapRoll. And this is the scene right here that we're going to kind of break down, the scene that we did in Boston, and see how we can get the best looking footage out of here, because it's just a Red Epic on some gyros here. So they're, it's electric powered, but there's going to be some movement, and it's really powerful what tools now we have in Adobe to fix any kind of shake issues or any kind of motion issues that we might have using these advanced motion control systems or helicopter systems. So to get started, we're going to start up a brand new project in Premiere. The first thing that we want to do is come under our hard drive. And I already created a new folder called Red Workflow. Inside that folder, I created a folder for media with some F3 and red footage, and then a projects folder once again with Premiere and After Effects folders. So those are your start. Remember, we can go ahead and put final render, put one for media manager, and down the line photos or whatever else you want to put in here, but following our standards. So I'm going to come under Premiere and go ahead and make a new project. I'm going to make sure I'm under the Premiere folder. I'm going to call this Red Workflow. And I already have a project. I'm going to overwrite that. Remember, you want to cancel out of this screen here. And I tell a lot of people that, that are using different applications or even Red's applications to process their Red Epic footage or even their Red 1 or whatever other camera systems they have, to try out Premiere as just a media manager type of tool just to review footage. And I'm going to show you how quick and easy that is. If I come under Premiere, under my Red Workflow folder, I'll come under some of my media here from the Red, and really all I have to do is select these .rdc folders or the files themselves and just click import, and literally that fast I have my Red footage in Premiere. Now, at first glance, it's not responding very well. And that's just because I don't have my playback resolution set properly. And so the trick is with red footage, this is a massive file. And you can see right here it's 38, this is a 4K red file, 3840 by 2160. And so what you want to do off the bat is go ahead and change your playback resolution down to a quarter. And you can see I didn't really notice any visible changes there, but I noticed a whole lot of performance changes. And I'm working off of a MacBook Pro right now. So I'm scrubbing back native 4K red footage in real time. And the cool thing about this workflow is, like I said, this is just, I can edit and kind of do almost like an offline edit right now, but it's as simple as right-clicking and changing to full, or even a half or eighth, depending on what I'm doing. And I could stack multiple files in my timeline. So I'm just going to bump this down to a quarter too, just so I have the best performance playback. And then what I want to do is go ahead and take this clip and drag it down to my new item. And that's just going to match my sequence now to my clip. Now, once again, I'm having performance issues on the timeline, and that's because I have to come back here again, right click, come back under playback settings, and change this down to a quarter, and pause resolution, change this down to a quarter. And now there we go. I'm playing back much, much quicker. It's really incredible what you can do these days, and that's why I think Premiere is just a very handy tool. I can go ahead and mark my ins and outs and do a very rough cut natively without needing to use any other application, and then I can start to integrate different media onto this timeline. So let me show you that real quick. If I want to come under my F3 footage now, I'm going to import some F3 clip. And that's just as simple as drag and drop. Don't worry about this. This is the additional files that were in there. And here's my MP4 file. And this is that behind the scenes of them flying this helicopter around. And you can see it's playing back in real time too. I can actually bump up playback resolution for this guy. It doesn't need to be a quarter, just so you can see. And there's the helicopter taking off and moving around. Pretty cool piece of gear right there, I have to admit. Everybody that sees this thing is like super excited. I guess we're all just like little nerds with our toys, but it's a really, really cool thing. Now, I just want to show, if I drag and drop this clip down onto this timeline now, I can still have it, but you can see the difference. This is, I think this is a 720p clip. So you can see the difference between 720p and 4K. It's a massive resolution change. So, you wouldn't want to scale this up to 4K, but what you can do is easily make a new sequence in 720p and then simply drag your red footage down inside that sequence. Now it's going to be huge, but you can right click and scale to frame size. And now I have red and F3 footage on the same timeline. And let me bring one more, and let me bring some 5D footage from our last project. Just bring in a clip here. And drag this down to the timeline too. Once again, I want to right click and scale to frame size. And I have 5D, 4K red, 1080p 5D, 4K red, and 720p F3 footage all on the same timeline, scrubbing back and forth with no problems at all. So you can definitely see why there's a lot of benefits behind using Premiere with this type of workflow when you're working with tons of different footage. I could throw a GoPro at this, I could throw time-lapse, I could throw a ton of different types of footage. Now, one thing with the current red workflow, which is great, good and bad, is if I want to start color correcting this footage, I can't really do it in a timeline, and that's things that I've given Adobe feedback and they're working on improving hopefully in the future. But right now, you actually have to, if you have a bunch of these clips in the timeline, you actually have to right click on the timeline, go to reveal in project, and it's going to pop it up in the project. And then you're going to right click up in the project, go to, go to source settings, and that's going to open up your R3D source settings files. And a lot of people don't even know this exists in Premiere. And, you know, you basically have all the power over your raw parameters. So I just want to go over this real quickly so you can have an idea of what you can and can't do when you're starting to color correct. But it's a lot like what we did in the time-lapse class when we were going over camera raw. And I'll show you some of the cool things. You have complete control over your white balance. So I can go in and warm this up or cool this down a little bit. And I'm going to warm it up just a bit. Change your tint, either to greens or magentas. You can adjust your highlights, your saturations. I'll pop the saturation up a little bit. You have a little bit of a playback bar in here so you can kind of see. I'm going to come over and this is the clip that I'm going to stabilize. So you can see it's a little bit shaky, but once warp stabilize is put on this, you'll be really surprised at what it can do. Now, I'm going to check where I have some grass and some different colors just so I can properly, so I don't over color correct these. I like putting up that saturation a little bit there, give it a little bit of contrast. Remember, the red natively shoots very, very flat. So you want to be able to come in and adjust some of these. Then I have my curves down here. I can go ahead and give it a little bit of an S curve. And you have your lift gamma gain settings and a lot of control right inside of Premiere without needing to go anywhere else. Once you're happy with it, you just click OK, and then you'll see that immediately update here in your playback. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick a section here. I like this section. Wow, it's coming over top of the ground here. And it's just an interesting look because normally to get this kind of feel, you would need, you know, almost like a techno crane that just kept going. And so this is a really, really cool thing to be able to kind of pop in and get these shots. So I'm just going to do a quick section here. It's about 15 seconds. And you can see some minor problems. It's pretty smooth, but there's a little bit of jitter, a little bit of shake in this footage. And that's just, I mean, you're putting a camera onto a helicopter, so there's going to be issues, especially when they're that light. But the cool thing is that's very easy to smooth out and fix using warp stabilizer. So there's a couple different options that we can do here. We can either send this directly to After Effects by right-clicking and replacing with After Effects composition, or we can go ahead and import this natively into After Effects. I'm going to, since it's just one clip, going to go ahead and do the replace with After Effects composition. And under my projects, After Effects, I'm going to call this warp test. And there we go, it imported natively, and it's already in my timeline. It's going to take a quick second to get, there we go. Now, you saw I brought my color correction over and it has my clip exactly where it needs to be. If I want to change the color correction further, I can come under my clip here, right click, go to interpret footage main, and then there's this little hidden button down here for more options, and there you have your exact same settings, everything where I left it off. And so I can make my adjustments further in After Effects if I wanted to. So the next step of what I want to do is just search for warp stabilizer because I just want to stabilize out this footage. And so all you do is drag and drop warp stabilizer onto your clip, and it's going to do 2 passes. But the cool thing is this is analyzing in the background, and so I can still move this around and continue to work in After Effects if my system's powerful enough, while After Effects goes in the background and starts analyzing the project. The first thing it does is analyzes frame by frame, and then it's going to go back and actually apply the stabilization. What I want to do real quick here is I'm going to actually close this project, not save it, because I have one already with Warp Stabilizer. I'm going to open this one up. And it takes, depending on the clip, that was 15 seconds. That might take close to 15-20 minutes, up to a half an hour to do. But the cool thing is once it has the points, you can come in and you can change a couple of the minor settings here. So I just want to show you briefly what this did to the clip. And it's smooth as glass now. Let me just play this one section for you here. So you can see it just took any kind of issues out, and now it's nice and smooth as it rolls through. So that's just a simple pass. Now, some of the other options underneath here that you can do with Warp Stabilizer is you have position scale, rotation, or perspective, or what's called subwarp. And subwarp is really the cool new, or subspace warp is really the cool new method they have to affect this stuff. So if I change it to position, it actually has to go back and restabilize that section of the footage. It doesn't take long though. And now it's just affecting the position. So if I render this out, you can see it's not as smooth as it was before when I have the subspace warp on. So the other thing that I can do is I can do stabilize only, stabilize crop, or stabilize synthesize edges. Stabilize only is going to show me how much stabilization this is actually doing. So I just want to put that on real quick so you can see these black bars around shows basically what's going on in the background. So you can see it's like bending and warping around my video to match. So in the beginning everything's good. You can see though at a 4K resolution I'm only losing a few pixels around the outside of this shot. And so most likely I'm going to output this at 1080p, and these black bars aren't going to be any issue at all. I'll just crop in a little bit. But if you want to go, a little bit farther, if it's really out of control, and you need to have more smoothness, you can come under some of these additional settings, things like crop less and smooth more, or coming under your smoothness setting. And basically what this is going to end up doing is on your clip it's going to, actually I need to have on stabilized crop, and that way I can get these settings down here. Then if I do the crop less, smooth more, and bump this up, the more I bump this up, the more it's going to crop, but the more smooth it's going to be. And you could end up going really far in to the point where you really start to lose resolution. But that's one of the cool things about shooting on the Epic is you have some resolution to burn for the most cases, as long as you're not outputting something in 4K. So now that we have that kind of set up, what I would normally do if I was still syncing this, I could go back to Premiere, or I can go ahead and composition, make movie, and come under my red workflow, media, red, and I'll just say red heli 2, click save, and then render out a ProRes version of this, and it's going to render out that 4K file with the color correction added. And so at this point I would lose my raw workflow, but I would have to no matter what, because I'm stabilizing it, unless I was doing the dynamic link. But at that point it's going to be really slow to get back and forth between. So it's best at this point just to do either natively in After Effects, importing those red files, or through Premiere. I'm going to come under and import the final version of this that I did earlier. And that's under my media, red, warp RC heli. And I'm actually going to open up a new item here, a new sequence with those settings. And you can see I'm still at that 3840 by 2160 resolution. And so here it is, nice and smooth, the final shot, as it does a nice pan over this foreground here over Boston. And so Now that I have kind of a nice cool dolly move here, I want to do, one thing that we always shoot, since this is on RC helicopters, you want to get as much, in any helicopter that you shoot, you want to get as many frames as you can. So we shot this at 48 frames per second, and it's a little bit slow of a move. I want to do a time remap here and just show you how easy that is to do some speed changes. So there's a few different ways that I can actually affect and change the speed here on this clip. One thing that I can do is come underneath, if this was actually the native R3D file, I could come underneath that file or the F3 file or wherever and come to modify interpret footage. I can actually assume what the frame rate is instead of actually getting that from the file. So if I knew this was shot at 48 frames per second, I could just type 48 frames per second in there, and it's going to play it back in real time, or at a more of a normal speed. In this clip, for instance, I can also do a couple different things. One thing is the rate stretch tool, and I can either slow it down or speed it up by moving this back and forth with the rate stretch tool. And that's going to either slow it down or it's going to speed up the clip. The other thing I can do is right click under speed duration and fix it to 100%. Or I can even reverse the speed, which will play it in reverse, or I can affect the duration, which will affect the percentage if these are linked. So what I simply want to do here is do a little time remapping. And so time remapping is built into every clip. And so when you click on the clip and you come under the effect controls, you'll see a drop down for time remapping. And I think Premiere really has one of the most intuitive time remapping tools. A lot of the times, if we're doing any time remapping on Phantom or different types of footage, we'll actually bring it into Premiere to do those things once the Phantom footage is actually converted properly into ProRes, and it just makes it a whole lot easier than other ways that I've done in the past. This could still be improved a lot, but at least it makes sense visually about what you want to do on the timeline. And so here I have my clip, and I want to pick a spot where I want to speed it up, like right here, and slow it down. So I like this part right here being sped up. It's nice and smooth when it's sped up, and then I can ramp it back down in here. So I'll pick somewhere right when it passes this gate over here, and right about here I'm going to start speeding up. What I do is set a keyframe here, and then what I'll do is set another keyframe where I want to start slowing down again, which is right about here. And so basically these keyframes represent points where it's going to speed up or change the speed. And right here you have kind of your velocity. And so all I have to do is click in between these two and start to drag my velocity up. I could drag these down on the ends or set as many keyframes as I want up and down, however fast I want to do. But just a simple move, just want to drag this up. And the problem with this is limited to 1,000, which I wish it would go higher. But I can go from 100% up to 1,000%, just like that. Now this looks a little bit choppy, and that's because I'm just hitting those speed changes. So you see, that can be a cool effect for certain things that you're doing if you just want to do a quick ramp, but what I actually want to do is smooth these out. So that's pretty easy to do too. I can actually zoom in here, just up to these edits here. What I want to do is start to drag out the sides here. What this is doing is setting up ramp points, and then I can actually affect how these curve here by just moving these little dots here around. So I can have a nice smooth curve as it comes up into those cuts. So you kind of saw it ramp. Now I can also take these points and move them over until they match just how I want. And so you can get a nice smooth change of speed in a clip. It comes in and out. And it doesn't need to be 1,000. I can bump this back down now if I want to, up to like 600 or so. move them in. And I can always come in and I can delete a point by selecting and deleting it if I want to, or moving them around and updating them, or just basically like keyframes. And so, nice easy way to add smooth motion to a clip. Well, everyone, that pretty much wraps up our course. I hope everybody really enjoyed our walkthrough of the BTS edit and some of the other tips and tricks we gave in this class today using warp stabilizer and speed changing and speed ramping. If there's any questions at all or anything that you still have questions about Premiere, please ask them away in the forums. And thanks so much, everybody, for all the support this term. I look forward to talking to everybody soon.